All right, mic check, 1 2 1 2. Ladies and gentlemen, we got a very special guest in the building today. I've known this guy probably since I was 7 8 years old. One of the first people I met when I moved to the United States back in 2001, I believe it was. I want everybody out there watching to kind of get to know what you're doing right now, where you're at right now, and just get to know your story and what happens to kids after high school, what happens when they go to college, what happens after college, because there's ups and downs. Sometimes in college, you have people that think they're going to the league. They think they're going to get the big money, and they don't really have a plan B. And then that can spiral a little bit, and then things don't go as they plan. And next thing you know, there's no backup plan.
Well, ultimately, I think that can go with anything, right?
Yeah.
I think the sport of football, basketball, whatever it may be, is equivalent to life. And that's why I'm so passionate about it, because most every kid is going to play some sport growing up. And so if we have to look at people's life through the glass of a football field or a basketball field, I think that equally reflects or mirrors what people's lives look like. So I take a lot of joy in being able to say, hey, I've stumbled, I've fallen, just like I'm able to rise. If you're able to rise, you're able to fall. How can I share some of the things that I've endured, not by sharing them, but by giving motivation and encouragement to some of the youth to be able to maybe miss some of the steps that I actually took myself? Because case in point, whenever some of these kids do get the success, we talk about failure, but sometimes the success is harder to deal with than the failure is. If somebody gives me $5 million as an 18-year-old, I may not spend it correctly either, right?
How do you feel about young players getting a big chunk of money at a young age? Do you feel like there should be contracts put in place where it's like their parents or legal guardian should have control of that money up until a certain age?
Well, I think ultimately we have to look at it from the scope of some of these people understand it's a business. Like, they actually understand it's a business. So there are dads who manage people's recruitment. There's the uncle that exists. There's the mom, Lamar Jackson. His mom is his manager. At the end of the day, she manages his recruitment. Like, she managed his NFL draft process. So at the end of the day, some of these people understand, and there's some people who are naive. And the people who are naive, it's sometimes their fault, and sometimes they just don't know. But the people who do know, they're not sharing it because it's competition. Yeah. And so ultimately, if these athletes, these student athletes, are able to get this money, they're going to have somebody. If they're really serious about the process, they're going to have some moving parts that are basically set up like they're already an NFL draft prospect, and they're handling things in that manner. I mean, there are kids where I have to go through a media credential request to talk to them. So, I mean, it's serious business out here.
Do you think that, or maybe does like the NFL already have some type of policies in place where these rookies that are coming into the league have like a financial advisor, where it's like a policy? Once you sign this contract, there's a financial advisor already set in place that's going to try to help you and get you set up and ready to go.
Yeah, well, I'll speak to the overall narrative of coaches and organizations, et cetera, because I can only speak to the overall, not people that I know personally and what they're able to do, because I can speak on their character more so than I can speak on the person I don't know. But from overall perspective, what I see is that ultimately it's your decision. You typically have an agent that you bring to the table to negotiate the deals, but the agent kind of leaves some things up to you, just like the organization leaves some things up to you and the agent. And if you decide that you don't want to have a financial advisor involved, well, you just don't have one. And, maybe the agent will advise you on some things, but ultimately he says, it's your money, use it how you want to. Now, I do know the NFL provides for the rookies whenever they enter the league, they have like a rookie symposium that actually does have a financial seminar class. Okay. But ultimately, free will, do with it as you please.
I want to jump in a little bit as to what you do right now, and when you first got out of high school. What was your journey from high school? Because if there's kids out there watching right now that are getting ready to graduate, they might not know what to do yet, or maybe they do know what to do, but they're still a little nervous if they should take that path or not. Can you share your story a little bit as to what happened, let's say, the month after you graduated, and if you knew what you wanted to do, if you didn't know yet, and just kind of give them your story of since you graduated high school up until today, so people out there listening can hear your side of the story as well.
Yeah, well, absolutely. I'm grateful for the opportunity to be on here again. Grateful to you to just be able to share my story. But, it's short and sweet, but I'm not a one-trick pony, so I just put it like that. I'm still actively involved in multiple things, but I guess one thing I'm becoming very known for is uh, my ability to evaluate and find talent, for lack of better terms, and promote that talent. But how it all started was in high school. Actually, I was a big time sports guy. Kind of knew about the process and how recruiting worked, and ultimately, um, just kind of going to SFA. Was able to work with the basketball team there during our most productive years in school history, and that was kind of a situation where I got to know the basketball players before people knew about them, and I said they're going to be special. Like I had a feeling, and kind of promoted it and went out of my way to do it. And after that, you go to the tournament a couple of times, and they're celebrities, and them. It's like, well, I told you so, right? But I was recruitment chair for my fraternity while I was in college, Pi Kappa Alpha. Also, while I was in school, I was an RA, so I'd watch over the dorms, and then also I ran the school campus radio show. So I mean, very actively involved because at the end of the day, success, quote unquote success, doesn't find you, you find it. You have to do the work. And so I was able to graduate, but while I was in school, did an internship with Jack Daniels or Brown Foreman. I was the first intern ever to do that. And because I lived a little bit different life back then. But, so while I was in school, I was able to work with Jack Daniels and then got out and went right into the liquor industry and was kind of a booze guy, was like the guy who knew the people at the clubs and hotels and all that stuff.
Was that a fun job too, though? Or what do you think of that lifestyle?
It was definitely unique. I had a lot of friends during that tenure.
Did you have to drink a lot or not really? Or
it came with the job. It was part of the responsibilities and the people that you're around. The bar owners, the club owners, they drink as well. But, like I said, just past life.
Of course.
And so I knew that. Like I knew long term, it just wasn't going to be for me, like for my spirit, for my soul, any of that. So I had an opportunity where I was always a recruiting guy. There's a company called Verified Athlete. Jimmy Andrews and Tommy DeLong, my friend out of Austin, he kind of made the connection. He said, this guy, you want him on your team. And ultimately, it was an opportunity for me to work with student athletes and help them through the recruiting process. They'd pay us a fee, and we'd get them scholarships. And so I was able to work with like Zach Ertz's cousin, Jack Ertz, and just different kids, who weren't really glorified stars, but wanted an opportunity. And so for me, I got to see the good side and the bad side of recruiting, so to speak. You get to deal with the parents. You also get to deal with the kids who have maybe higher expectations than what they should. But it also taught me how to have empathy, how to have sympathy, how to not be a yes man, but to see what a yes man looked like. And then also to see just like how branding and get a better understanding of how the process worked from the coach's angle of knowing college coaches. And so really after that tenure, I was able to transition more to the reporting side. So with a company called The Old Coach, where I started kind of getting my foot in the ground of going and doing live game tweeting, going and talking to the athletes where, I got my first like class of kids, 2019 group, where most of them are like sophomores and juniors now in college. But that's where I started to build relationships with that class. And from that turned into 247 Sports, which is where I started to really get known for some things where last year I probably did 70 plus games in person, and visited, any number of people. But, my whole thing was I'm not going to be out evaluated, meaning I'm going to see as many kids as possible. I'm going to develop great relationships, and I'm going to know kids in every single state across the country. And then kind of fast forward into today, long story short, even though it's still long. But, I was offered a job by Rivals.com a little over a month and a half ago to run the Alabama site on Rivals.com, Tide Illustrated, as the recruiting writer. So I will have the entire country, but really like the Southeast region will be my territory, identifying Alabama targets, but still identifying talent across the entire country because that's what I do.
Wow, that's amazing. I mean, first of all, congratulations to your whole come up from where you started to where you are now. And even though the future is super bright for you, just what you've been able to achieve in the last 9-10 years or so is amazing. When it comes to recruiting players out of high school and when it comes time to them going to a college, when you speak to these players, do you see in them that they know really what they're doing, or do you feel like they could use some guidance?
Well, I think that's a great question. Sometimes it's just hard to be ready for a process that none of us should really be ready for unless you've been through the process, right? So it makes it a tricky situation. But when I talk to a lot of kids, I've been able to kind of interact with kids on every different level, whether that's FCS or, Power Five, or whether that's Georgia, or, like having interactions with not only the kids, but the parents. And so having those conversations, one thing that I was able to distinctly notice, and I noticed it before I even got the job, was that Alabama and like some of the top upper echelon players, they handle things differently, especially if they have a Bama offer. Like you'll notice with how they handle media, you'll notice like how they talk, like everything is kind of tempered, versus a kid who doesn't know anything. It's just like, oh, I'm in a part of the process. And so for some kids, it's night and day. You need help. You just need help simply with the process. But for some kids, even if you have 50 offers, it doesn't make the process easier. You're hearing from multiple reporters. You're probably getting some money under the table. You're getting fan bases that hit you up all day and night. And so there are some things that you're going to deal with that ultimately you just have to deal with. But that said, for the extracurricular, I think, some families put that in place. Some people know my kid's on his way here, and they're putting those things in order. Whereas some kids, they need some guidance because they may come from a single parent home, or they may blow up late, or they may, just whatever the situation may be. So I take it as a case by case basis. Mm-hmm. But if I get kids in a group where I feel like the setting's right, I'll share some information that needs to be shared. Mm-hmm. But I think just every kid has this process, and they have to play it out the way it plays out.
As far as like for the 2023 year, do you know off the top some of the top 10 recruits that are going to come up? Are you allowed to share any of them? Or like in your opinion, what are some names that you feel like are definitely about to blow up out of high school?
So, I mean, you start with Arch Manning. You can't do this without saying Arch Manning. I mean,
do you have a feeling where he might go?
No, he's going to Texas.
Texas Longhorns?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. And I think they said they spent like $375,000 on his recruiting visit. Like just for
I
food
did hear that.
And
wow. How do you feel about that? Do you think that's special treatment or?
Yeah, as it should be. Yeah. I mean, at the end of the day, you get him, you're going to get other players. And at the end of the day, the game is about who has the most players. I mean, everyone talks about everything else. Who has the most talent? And 9 times out of 10, if you have the most talent, you're winning.
Would you say that Arch Manning had the opportunity to go to any college that he would have chose, right?
Yeah, I mean,
everybody pretty much would have wanted him, or at least given him a chance.
Yeah, I mean, whenever it came down to, Alabama, Texas, Georgia, Clemson, and I'll leave it like in that group. But I mean, that's kind of what it came down to. And if you have those, you have everybody.
How many years do you think he plays in college before he decides to enter the draft?
I think he'll be there 3 years because he'll have to be there. But then Quinn Ewers will play next year because he'll hopefully, if Quinn Ewers comes back and has success, Quinn Ewers will start next year. If Quinn Ewers comes back and does not have success, things get interesting. But if Quinn Ewers comes back and has success, Quinn Ewers will start next year. That means Arch Manning will redshirt. Then the following year, Arch Manning will start. Then the following year, Arch Manning will go to the league. And that's how it play out. That's how I see it playing out. But it all depends on Quinn Ewers right now, him being healthy.
Okay, that makes sense. That way, it's like the first year. I mean, they already have a starting quarterback. He's doing good. Arch coming in, he's pretty much a red shirt, and he's just hoping for his chance, right? Mm-hmm. When that chance comes, he presents himself. If he does great, the next year is even better. And all you need is pretty much that 1 year where the stats are through the roof, where everything is looking great, and then you enter the draft.
Yep.
How do you feel about some players? I think Tim Tebow was one of them, where you have a spectacular season. Everything is great. You can literally enter the NFL draft and be a top 10 pick, and you still decide to come back to school to do one more year. What happens if you come back and you have a, God forbid, season-ending injury where you can't play football again? Is that something that these players should think twice about, or do you say just go with your gut feeling and do whatever you like to do?
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, it is your decision. So for me, I'm always going to – the kid's decision. Like, it's your decision. It's your life. Live it. So, I mean, I'll leave it at that on that note. But flipping that has been a note of interest, where a player comes back or a player decides to leave or, whatever the case may be. But, it just goes back to ultimately this is these kids' decisions. Now, if we have rules and regulations put in place for them to not leave, then, they follow the rules and regulations. But until we have those things in place, hey, I'm all for the kid doing what they want to do. But, I may question, I may provide some insight, but then it's your call, because you're the one waking up at 5 o'clock in the morning. You're the one who has to deal with the injuries, or even that you're the one that has to deal with the fans who give you death threats or tell you this and that. So, for me, I just want to be even keel with these kids, because at the end of the day, just because this kid's ranked number 1 does not mean he's going to get drafted number 1. And just because this kid's ranked number 276, well, he may be number 176 when it's all said and done. And I just want to be fair to them all and allow them to live out their process and their dream.
I know there's been some stories as far as, especially back in the day of like college players receiving money back when they really couldn't receive money. I know now it's a little different. Do all players receive money right now in college, or it's literally the only ones that get sponsored that can receive the money?
Yeah, it's a case by case basis. In some cases, like even school by school basis. In some cases, the school will give every player a scholarship. I think BYU gives every player, even every walk-on, a scholarship. So in that situation, you'd have one. So that's a selling point for them. I think Texas, every single offensive line recruit gets like $50,000. So that's something they're selling as well. But ultimately, you're going to have to be a good player to get real money.
Do you think that any of that is happening with high school kids?
As far as them getting paid?
Under
Absolutely.
the table or things like that? Wow.
Absolutely.
So even from a high school at 17, 18 years old, people are coming in and giving them money under the table and things like that to hopefully get them to go one way instead of another.
That's where it starts. You get more money before you get there than after, really.
Wow.
Unless you perform, yeah.
The person giving the money, if he gets busted, what's the worst case scenario? Can he go to jail? Can he go to prison? Or is it just some type of offense? Or what happens when the person giving the money under the table gets busted?
Well, I think it's like an unspoken rule, per se,
Yeah.
where it's like, at the end of the day, like, what's the coach going to do? He's gonna call the police on giving he gave you the money. He's going to tell on you, and he's going to say, I gave him this money illegally to come to my school. He took the money that I gave him illegally, and now he's at a different school. And then NCAA is going to say, well, you gave him the money though, right? So you just snitched on yourself.
What about like for all the young kids out there watching that are in high school right now, if they're being bribed with somebody, what are the consequences for them, so they know if the consequences are high, don't ruin what you have going on over a couple $1,000s. What are, if the player gets caught that he was taking money under the table, what happens to that player?
It could affect your recruitment. You could see suspensions or allegations or whatever the case may be. You see it with Arizona State. You see it clearly with Tennessee, where they were giving away McDonald's bags full of money. So, they're going to receive suspensions, and it will hurt their program. So ultimately, you just have to, it's a tough situation. You have to take into account, if you're going to do it, you do it the right way. You do it with the NIL. That's what they put in place, and that's what you go with. And then that's approved, so you go with it. The other stuff, you do the NIL, and if you want to be safe.
Wow, okay. And then I know, like, even with college players, they started making sure that recently, like, top college players can start getting paid. I think the highest one was like a quarterback that was like $730,000, right? It was like a crazy amount of money.
You can add a zero to it if you want at the end. And
wow, so millions at this point while in college.
In high school, he hasn't even played it down yet.
Wow, getting over $1 million in high school.
Yeah, kid out of California, Nico, committed to Tennessee. Funny enough, yeah, but they have, like, they say he's a $7 million quarterback, but obviously most people don't know the actual breakdown of that, and it may be hearsay, but at least right now he's quoted as the $7 million quarterback.
And that's pretty much where the college pays him to play for them, or how would that work?
Yeah. It's NIL. So the NIL deal in place will be, you may get a deal with you. You could be an NIL partner to the player at TCU or
I guess, could
SMU,
you explain a little bit, like, to the fans out there watching, what an NIL means for like an everyday person that just might not know?
So name, image, and likeness. So ultimately, you're being able to be paid for your name, image, and likeness. So at the end of the day, like, if I have a name, image, and likeness, I want to be paid for it. The video games, if that's me on the video game, I want to be compensated for it. Hey, if you're making money off of my videos or my jerseys, I want to be compensated for it. And so the players really stood up and said, we want to be taken care of. And the NCAA said, we are making billions of dollars. We feel like it's only right to do it. And there's so many boosters that have wanted players and been involved with players over the course of time leading up to the NIL that, if they have a business and they have a Chevy dealership, what are they going to say? They're not going to say no to, hey, player, come to my school, and I'm going to give you a Chevy truck for coming to my school. Because this is our NIL deal that we have in place, where I give you a Chevy truck. You come to my location. You take some photos, some videos. I put it on my social media. I win. You win. We all win. Name, image, and license.
Makes sense. Now, what happens to, let's say, like the quarterback, he's getting a $6-7 million deal for that college. What happens to like the offensive line? Because I'm sure those guys are the ones that are out there blocking for this quarterback, and they might feel like they're putting their life out on the line every single Friday night or Saturday night. What happens to them? Do they get anything, or should they get something? Or because I feel like if they should at least get 20%, 30%, But they're, sometimes being an offensive tackle might be a boring position, so you might not have a likeness to it, and you might not get any money for it. But at the end of the day, the quarterback behind you might not be nearly as good if you're not out there protecting him day in and day out.
Absolutely. I think, again, it goes back to like just being who you are in that moment. So at the end of the day, like say for instance, if I was a Texas fan, hypothetically, if I actually follow the team, I know if the left tackle is good. So if I know if the left tackle is good and he's the best player on the team, somebody's giving him an NIL deal because they know if they don't give him one, Texas A&M is probably going to find a way to say, hey, into the transfer portal and get an NIL deal with us. So the alumni at the school are really the ones who are involved in that NIL. And as long as they know their school and they're involved, they can get involved in that regard and really want to push for it. But in regards to like the contrast between, the quarterback and offensive line, well, Tennessee chose to put that out based on like my understanding to market the program. Like it was a marketable thing. It got hot for the program. And I'm sure some of the other players are getting paid and they have deals in place. But ultimately, if the offensive lineman wants to go there and play with him, he goes into it knowing potentially this kid's making $7 million and potentially I'm not. I'm being given a scholarship. Do I want to make the most of this, or do I want to go somewhere else where I don't have a scholarship, or they give me more money, or whatever the case may be? So I think, as far as the contrast, that comes down to how good of a coach they have, just to keep, everybody on the same page, which wouldn't change. And then ultimately what type of player he is to care about that. Because at the end of the day, like in the NFL, it happens every day. Aaron Rodgers makes $50 million a year, where the next receiver on the team may make $6 million. What is the receiver going to do? He's not going to show up, or is he going to show up, right? So he's probably going to show up. And if he shows up and shows out, he's probably going to make more money. And that's the mindset you kind of have to have.
What about there's a, and I'm not sure how much you're allowed to talk about it, but there is a recruit that just recruited to Alabama, I believe. Are you allowed to talk about what position he plays, how that process went? Where do you see his future going?
Yeah. So Jalen Hill, receiver out of Longview, Texas. I'll actually go see him tonight, actually, as well. But solid prospect according to Rivals rankings. He's a top 50 player, I think maybe 53, so maybe top 100 player. But highly coveted, has been recruited for the last 4 years. And really, it was a situation where a lot of people had got information about Texas. And crazy enough, I'd got the information about Bama a month ago. But I cross-examined it and just didn't get the information I needed because I didn't know the kid well enough to pursue it. So it was Texas heavy pretty much for the last 4 or 5 months. In the span of overnight to this week, it flipped to Alabama. But we found out it'd been at Alabama the whole time. And so, he's been highly coveted, 6'2 and a half, 6'2", 175 pounds, but will go over the top, has sure hands, is elusive at points. The kid, has the numbers to back it up too. So, exciting prospect. And for Alabama, East Texas has become a hotbed for them. They recruit a kid there out of East Texas every year, it seems like now.
And now when he goes to Alabama, you think within 3 years, if he performs and does what we believe that he'll do, that within 3 years he'll be in the league?
Yeah, if he performs well, obviously Saban saw something in him to recruit him hard, and to not just let him go to Texas. So if Saban sees that much in a kid, and even based on his quotes, the kid said, Hale said that he's projected to go in there and play immediately. So that would put him on the 3-year plan. And so for Saban to want him to have conversation about him playing immediately, and Alabama has a history of playing players early, whether that's Devontae Smith, Henry Ruggs, Jalen Waddle, Jerry Jeudy, Jamison. They produce receivers as well. And so he's going to be a part of a group of established receivers who've been developed and went to the league. And so if he just follows that same development plan, he'll have success as well.
With him still being in high school, right? What do you see? Where do you see his mindset? Are the emotions there? He knows Alabama's a huge school. So going from East Texas, being in a high school compared to one of the number one schools in the country, what goes through his head? You talked to him a few times, so he might share some of his thoughts with you. I know, of course, everybody's excited, but how does somebody transfer from East Texas high school to a big college like that and not let the pressure get to them?
I think Nick Saban does a tremendous job. Obviously, he does because you count how many rings he has. He has success. I think it's all about. It goes back to getting the kids that are the right fit for your program. And so, what I've come across when I run into Alabama kids for the most part is they have a similar mindset in how they handle things. And Hale's kind of to himself, and I think he's more so just about the work and the process. And usually at Alabama, if you're worried about the work and the process, things are going to play themselves out because you're not focused on like the drama or the hoopla. You're focused on the work. And Nick Saban kind of preached about that first, like the work is the first thing and the most important thing. So if Hale goes down there and he's focused on the work and he plays early, he'll be playing on Sundays because you don't play on Alabama early and for several years and not go to the league and not go early at that point.
So you think he'll play his first year?
I mean, that's what he mentioned. He said Nick Saban talked to him about it, and they're going to lose some players after this year. So, I mean, there's definitely an opportunity for him to play early, definitely.
Yeah, especially with Alabama. I feel like how many guys enter the NFL draft, I feel like there's new spots almost every year to be filled. Yeah, that's going to be amazing. Well, hopefully within, 3 years, we'll watch back on this interview, and he'll be in the NFL by then, and we'll be supporting him day in and day out, and that's awesome. Is there any other players that are in high school right now that you definitely see a bright future for them?
There's some guys out there. I mean, I'm really spending a lot of time in 2024, 2025, but I mean, the list goes on. I mean, you have the Arch, you have the Jalens, you have the Jalen Haywards. I mean, Desmond Riggs, you name it, the kids are out there. I'm just really in the mode right now, just watching them play and allowing them to have success.
What does a last name do to a player as far as right now, if there's like, let's say, Emmitt Smith. If Emmitt Smith had a 16-year-old son that's in 10th, 11th grade right now, does the name of that player attract attention already before the player even has success?
Name's always going to gain some steam. I mean,
will it at least get attention?
Yeah,
like people will at least check it out that maybe if he didn't have that Emmitt Smith's bloodline, they might not even look at him just yet until the stats perform. But just because they have that, it could be like LaDainian Tomlinson, right? If he has a 17-year-old kid, do scouts go more to, because of that last name, do they go more in that direction just because they're curious? Okay, there might be something more here because they already know in the past what his father might have done or what kind of a player his father was, where they're already chasing after the kids at a young age. Even if the stats aren't there just yet, they have a feeling that they can develop this player to be a crazy player down the road.
Yeah, I think last name is always important in every regard. You're fighting to build your last name even further, right? I want my last name to mean something. And so I think that's important in politics. I think that's important in every single aspect of life. Last name means something. Like, people can say it doesn't, but it does to a certain degree.
I feel like it helps you get to a certain point, but eventually you hit that brick wall where it's like you got to outperform the other guys. And eventually you're going to get stuck in a situation where you got 3-4 guys outperforming you and you're the 4th, 5th on that list. So you have that name, it got you that far, but now it's like these guys that didn't have the name, they're just outperforming you and they're going to move up and you're either going to get better or you're going to stay back, right?
Yep.
To switch topics a little bit from football to go to basketball, how do you feel about LeBron James' son? I mean, he's coming up right now. It already seems like he's the chosen one. He's the next LeBron. Is that too much pressure to put on a kid at a young age? Or do you think he's built for it because he's been in the spotlight because of his father?
Yeah, I've been known to be a contrarian, just I guess across the media space, and I don't really speak out on too much when I do. I usually keep it behind closed doors, but I'm just not like high on him, I guess, like other people may be. I'm like, the last name is very helpful in that situation. I say that because I was excited what I saw early on, but I was expecting him to be like 6'7" or 6'5" or 6'6" because Bron's 6'9", so I want him to be more along those lines. And even if he didn't get all of it, if he got some of it, it was going to be helpful. But for me and my Bronny eval, it's solid. He'd be a good college player, but the whole chosen one, no, I'm not behind that. That's still LeBron until proven otherwise.
What about the situation with Lavar Ball and his 3 kids?
I think Lavar definitely helped
because
like
he got a
crates,
lot
like
of
the
slack early
brand.
on.
Yeah,
If you remember, it was like he was tough on his kids. He was doing too
That's the
much.
media, though. That's what we do.
That's
There has to be a yin and yang.
as a parent. That's what. And now that the kids are successful, now people are finally understanding what he was trying to do there, and they're understanding the bigger picture. I guess, what is your opinion on how Lavar handled the situation with his children? Do you appreciate what he's done now that you see the outcome?
I mean, masterful job, I'd say. At the end of the day, the kids may have had success elsewhere because one's like 6. I can't remember how tall they are, but they're all tall. So like they have size, and he helped with the offense kind of fitting what they did. But you'd hope another dad would do that if he had 3 boys like that too. But then being outspoken ultimately did help them, because at the end of the day, he took the approach that any media is good media and buzz is buzz. And so at the end of the day, he knew his kids could play to a certain degree, and they can. And to be able to back it up with just their play, and then to be a kind of media guy, because at the end of the day, that's why we have MTV and we have all these, because the Wild sells. And so he sold, and it ultimately helped sell his kids. Now, like people's reaction to if they back it up, that's still on us. But his job of getting them there, he did a masterful job doing that.
Definitely. And I know he has the Big Baller brand. Do you know if that brand is passed down to the kids as well? Or like Lonzo and LaMelo, do they have their own brands? Do they go their own direction, or are they still part of the Big Baller brand?
Yeah, I actually used to watch the show on Facebook like weekly. It was enjoyable. Just something to do. But I want to say, based on, so this isn't like me verbatim knowledge, but based on what I've seen, is that he runs the Big Baller brand, and he has the middle son, Jello, is like a feature athlete. And then LaMelo is sponsored by Puma. He has like some $300 million deal or something like that with Puma. And then the older brother is still kind of unclear where he's at, Lonzo. But I'm pretty sure the dad still owns it, because I'm sure the sons gave him some money. So the dad still owns it, and then I think he still works with the middle son, Jello.
Now, back to you. I want to talk a little bit more about you getting ready to move to Alabama. Where do you see your future, let's say, in like the next 5 years? Because that's exciting. The future is getting very bright for you. Where do you see yourself in 5 years from now?
I think that's an interesting question. I used to do that. I used to take life like 10-5.
Yeah.
I don't.
Do you think NFL's the next step after college, or?
No, I like where I'm at. It's the key to everything. But,
Yeah.
going to Alabama, I would never imagine that I'd ever leave Texas. Like I used to say it all the time. Like I would never. Texas is the base for everything. I mean, you see it right now. People are coming to Texas. And I saw that early on, that Texas is the base for everything. But Nick Saban, you don't say no to Nick Saban, and you don't say no to Alabama. And like the doors that can open up, just in any regard. If you do the work, it will pay off. And so I just look at it as right now, I'm just focused on doing the work, building the relationships, and everything else that comes from it, people will see because it's being planned. But right now, I'm focused on the work.
Now, when you go down there, are you pretty much part of the football team, or are y'all in a different division, or are you pretty much like locker room access?
It's like football team, and then we're like the media that reports on the football team.
Okay.
And most importantly, like for me, I care about the recruits that are getting recruited by the football team. So like all day I've been on my phone, as I type right now. On my phone I have, what time is it? 1:54?
12:54.
That's weird. Daylight savings. Weird. I just learned something new. But so ultimately, like all day I've been checking to see like what people are going on visits, like where who's going to be where this weekend. So I already like having a good idea of like where kids are going this weekend. And so that's part of the job for me right now, is just making sure I know where these kids are going.
That's amazing. Well, we wish you the best, of course, especially down your journey with Alabama. We hope that everything goes well for you. We appreciate you coming on to our show. I know you're on a super tight schedule.
Not even like that.
I appreciate you stopping by today and sharing some of the knowledge and information. And we'll be riding with you all the way to Alabama and wherever that is after that. And I think you should come back within a year or two and update us on how things are going down there. And we'd be happy to have you.
Hey, I appreciate it. And, at the end of the day, for me, it's all about relationships. And, you said it's been 10 years, but somehow after 10 years, I'm on a podcast, right? So, for me, I just have to humble myself and understand that I really have accomplished nothing. And And even when I accomplished the world, I've still accomplished nothing because it's really not about me. And so I'm grateful for this platform today to be able to talk about me, but it's about the kids. And I'm not going to change my stance on that. So grateful, I appreciate it, but it's about them.
For sure. Yeah. Talker. Wow. Thank you guys.